the few people that are still actually visiting these parks, why can't you understand that these whales should not be there? The only pool at Shamu Stadium that is as long or longer than the killer whales is the front show pool. So all other
What?
pools in the back pool, the whales drag their tail flukes because the depth is not even as long as the whales. Because I was Takara's team leader and had the strongest relationship with her, I'm having to be in control of Takara while she's being artificially inseminated and just telling her over and over again, I'm sorry. I tried to stop this. I'm sorry. Eventually she took her last breath and she just nosedived right down and into this barrier, and she wasn't coming up. So I swam down to get her. And when I swam down, it was so sad. Her eyes were open. And I was just looking at her eyes, and her mouth was open just slightly. And she was so beautiful. And it was just like heartbreaking, just like so sad that this whale, she was born in captivity. First day of life, her mother is taken away from her. The 2.5 years have been brutal for her. And then she dies like this. She dies panicking.
John Hargrove, thank you so much for joining me in the sit down, mate. How you getting on?
Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry it took a little while on my end to work it out, but I appreciate your patience.
No, it's no problem. I've been trying to get you on for a while. We've been in contact for a couple of months now. I know you went on a little retreat. What was that like? What were you up to there?
I guess it was a retreat mentally, emotionally, but it was like mountain man living for almost 2 months. And I literally went into a cabin. It wasn't mine. It was a friend of mine's. I didn't rent it. It was owned by my friend. And the Great Smoky Mountains, no electricity, no telephone, no Wi-Fi, no cell phone service. I had a satellite phone for emergency, and just me and my dog in this mountain where no one else in the world knew where I was except for my friend, who that's his property and that's his cabin. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
What effects did it have on you?
Just how much I don't want my phone, don't need my phone, don't need the internet. It's like a compulsion when you have it in front of you, and if the laptop's there, you just open it, even if you don't want to open it. It's like an automatic reflex. I'm sure, obviously, you don't understand what I'm saying, and we're just also addicted to. Even if we're not even looking for anything or wanting to look for something, but we're like, I have to open my laptop, I have to get on my phone, and to just have those things, like, it's not even an option, and just really focus on nature, the beauty of this very rustic, simplistic cabin, spending time with my dog. It really was amazing. I wish I could find a better adjective, but it was profound.
Yeah. I once, talking about that, we always take the piss out of my mum for scrolling just constantly through her phone. And one time, and I'm like, Mum, you're not even scrolling looking at anything, Mum. And she's gone, what? And I'm going, Mum, you're scrolling through the settings in your phone. Like, you're not like, you're not actually doing it, you're just scrolling through the settings. So yeah, we always give a stick about that. But you've always been at one with nature, haven't you? Or at least had an affection for nature. Your whole career, even now, it revolves around animals and nature. Obviously, you were a trainer at SeaWorld and Marineland as well with killer whales for a long time. So first of all, could you tell us a little bit about that career and what you did for a living?
Yeah, so it was a dream of mine since 6 years old when I first went to SeaWorld. At that time, the Texas park had not been built yet, but there was California and Florida and Ohio that most people don't even know existed, because they closed that one in, I think, at the very beginning of 2000. But anyway, so when I first went to a SeaWorld park, I just became absolutely fixated and fascinated on the show, seeing the trainers in the water with the whales, and I understood even at age 6 that there was a relationship there. And I, from that moment forward, not only did I, in my own mind, say this is what I'm going to do, but I told everybody around me, teachers, friends, parents, and even my classmates, the ones I still keep in touch with now. They'll often tell me, they'll like, you used to say this stuff, in second grade you were talking
Mm.
about this, and then in junior high school, nobody believed me, that I was actually going to achieve that, because it's like, who do you know that's actually a killer whale trainer at SeaWorld?
Yeah, yeah.
And I swim tested when I was 19 years old. I was currently enrolled at University of Houston for my psychology degree. Did not think that SeaWorld would even touch me until I graduated. And because I had gone to SeaWorld so many times to harass the trainers and talk to them after shows, and I want to be like you. What did you do? What advice can you give me? There was an apprentice trainer position, which everyone starts at that level, at the very bottom, apprentice. And management went to the senior trainers and said, we have a swim test coming up for a position. Who do you know of that would make a good candidate? And they said, that kid that comes here all the time and talks
He won't
to
leave
us.
us alone.
Yes, and it's true. I wouldn't leave him alone. It's like, well, when did you do the swim test? How long, how tough was the swim test for you? I mean, it was just question after question after question, which later in my career, I returned the favor to aspiring trainers that would visit the show over and over again, and reminded me of myself. But out of, let's see, it's been so long since I've told this detail. There were 27, and for anybody that may be watching this, but like, he lied. He said in his book it was 26. Okay, whatever it was. I believe there were 27 of us that took the swim test. Out of us 27, I was one of only 3 people that passed it. So the 3 of us were interviewed, because then you pass on to the interview process. And then out of us 3, I was chosen. So I was 19 years old, but by the time the paperwork went through and I started, I had just turned 20. So I started very, very young, which was actually a huge advantage, because at that time, especially, the average of trainers beginning as an apprentice was anywhere from 24 to 27 years old. So I got this huge jump up from my career, which is incredibly advantageous, because our bodies can't do that forever. You are a professional athlete with what you have to do in the water with those whales. Of course, I'm ascribing all this to, if you're at Shamu Stadium, you swim with the whales. If you're a sea lion trainer, you're a dolphin trainer, it is a different circumstance, and you can obviously go on much longer. But for killer whale, to do the things that we were doing in the water with those whales, you have a very short shelf life to how long your body will allow you to do that.
So it was quite an innocent start to your career. It seems like just like a passion for animals, and specifically killer whales as well. But the reality of it was that there's a darker side, isn't there? Quite a significant darker side to it all, and the way that these animals live. Did you know about those dark sides at all when you were applying for that process?
Not at all. I really viewed it as a utopian world. I viewed it as, once I become, this was one of the driving factors for me too, as a child and adolescence, when I had the singular obsession that I was going to be a killer whale trainer for SeaWorld, that, I've spoken about in some interviews, not much, but very difficult family upbringing. A father murdered his best friend when I was very, very little. And my sister was raised in foster care. I was a teenage runaway multiple times. I think for the third and last time of me running away was the last time. I never came back, because I had turned 18 at that point. So it was, during all that time, it was just like, my mind, I would say, all these problems will go away, and I will finally be happy, and I won't be lonely, and I'll have everything that I want once I can become a killer whale trainer for SeaWorld. Because too, at that, you're thinking too, I'm a child of the 80s, graduated high school in 92, started my career in 93. So especially during that time, the way that the world and society viewed animals in captivity was very different from what we view it, how we view it now and today, and the resources that we have to get information. So really, all you had was the propaganda coming out of SeaWorld, and SeaWorld is actually, this is where we'll give them credit. They're brilliant at crafting their image, and
Yeah.
people are very fooled by that propaganda, and you're sucked into that these whales live a perfect existence in a bacteria free, pristine water, and just live these magical lives, educating millions of people around the world. I mean, how fantastic. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Really?
It's very sad. It's very sad.
Well, what is the reality of it then?
From a trainer's perspective, we are there because we love those killer whales, and that was our passion and our dream as a child. Almost all of us have the same story. So the dichotomy of it is on the one end, for us as trainers, from the heart, we're there for the right reasons, because
Yeah.
you know those whales are going to be in captivity regardless, and we're there because we do want those relationships. And then when we do build those relationships, I'll speak for myself, I love those whales more than anything else in the entire world. Nothing was more important to me than those relationships with those whales. Unfortunately, then once you start getting to that level, where actually now you are the trainer that's in the water doing the shows with the whales, you're that person. You're also now the person who is privy to what's really going on at SeaWorld, and what the corporation really, what their agenda is, and what they eh, expect out of those whales that are not in the whale's best interest, and out of me that are not in the best interest for my own health and safety, so that they can earn billions and billions and billions of dollars of profits off the backs of those whales suffering in captivity.
Mm.
And that's the reality. That's the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no argument like, well, maybe, that's your opinion, and maybe. No, it's not my opinion. It's fact, and I can back it up with look at some facts like this. The water. Take the water for example. The water is treated with 3 caustic, deadly chemicals to treat the water, so that the water is clear, so that the public can see the whales. Um, Chlorine, obviously, which for years SeaWorld denied. We were instructed to lie, straight out lie to the public, that we did not use chlorine in the pools, which was a lie. We inject bleach, direct bleach, into the pools. There's injectors that it's on a timed system, and water quality handles that. And it's bleach that is 6 times more powerful than household bleach. And even us as trainers, sometimes we would get severe medical eye burns, because we would be, being foot pushed by the whales underwater. Obviously, our eyes are open because we have to see where we're going, and we steer the whales. And as water quality management would describe it, as a pocket of chlorine had been injected into the pool, then it hadn't dispersed properly yet, and it burned and scalded our eyes. I mean, it's so severely that it's not like, oh, you just go to an eye wash station. No, we were taken off-site to medical facilities, and our,
Wow.
our, our eyes were bandaged shut for days, or we risked permanent blindness. And I probably had 5 or 6 severe eye burns like that, where my eyes were taped shut with bandages, each time varying different days, how many days rather, before I could take the bandages off and even
Mm.
expose my eye to light, or risk permanent blindness. So you have chlorine, you have, it's been, I'm a little rusty on this. The last interview I did was in 2019 for CBS, so bear with me here. So there's, oh my gosh.
He's lost it. John's
I
lost
know
it.
I've lost it. This is what happens now that I'm not going from courtroom to courtroom and media interview to media interview, which is actually a good thing. So I'm glad that
Yeah.
I'm more relaxed now, and not always having to speak and think of legal terms and behavioral terms. So yeah, my life, thank God, is much more relaxed now. But we'll come back to it because I'll think of it.
We'll come back to it. So these killer whales do not live in the correct conditions for what they should be, and it's not even close, is it?
No, it's so sad. I mean, you know, I think in preparation for this interview, because obviously I was thinking about it, I just started watching videos of prisoners, the effects of them in solitary confinement and what it does to them emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And I'll have to tell you, with my 14 years of experience, what I witnessed with these whales and the damage that it does to them behaviorally and physically. It is the equivalent of putting a human being in solitary confinement. All of those things that I was watching and hearing doctors and scientists, discussing the effects on a person who's been in solitary confinement for years. Those are all of the same things that I saw with the whales. And also, again, this is not just subjective things that I'm talking about. For example, we did blood work on the whales. At one point, it was every 2 weeks. We did that for years, and then we backed off and we would do it every 4 weeks. And in the blood work, we can see, obviously, we're testing to see if any of them are sick, so we can get them on antibiotics right away. But you can also measure the stress levels with the whales. And all of the whales had elevated stress levels at all times. And that's a direct result of confinement and living in, and not only confinement, but a completely sterile environment where they have no stimulation. The only stimulation is when we, as trainers, step down to them, so be a SeaWorld term, and we begin our interaction with them either for sessions or shows. When we're not doing that, the whales are so bored, they just stare at a blue painted concrete wall and float motionless at the surface of the water. And this is also important for people to know. The only pool at Shamu Stadium in California, Texas, and Florida that is as long or longer than the killer whales is the front show pool. So all other pools in the back pool, the whales drag their tail flukes because the depth is not even as long as the whales. So just to help people process, like, yes, those pools look big for us as people.
And
they are. They're the biggest pools in the world. But for people, not for a 21-foot killer whale that's 8,000, 12,000 pounds. It's real flat out cruelty. It really is. It's just, there's no other way to try to sugarcoat it or explain it away. And I think the dilemma and the struggle with us as trainers is that, it takes a long time before you're privy to this information and understand it, because it takes a long time to progress up through the ranks at Shamu Stadium where you can do all these things with the whales. And then you are given the truth and the information about the blood work and the medications and what it is and why we're giving it and what the agendas are. But it's once you get that far along, then you're trapped by your true reciprocal relationship with these whales, and you feel this incredible guilt. Like, if I just walk out of here, I'm just abandoning these whales that I love more than anything. They're going to stay in captivity. I'm going to go on with my life and I have freedom, but they're never going to be free. So, so that keeps you, because you feel like, okay, I love these whales. I'm their best spokesperson to take care for them. What good is it going to do them if I leave? So then you get trapped, because I've often been asked, well, why didn't you leave sooner? And it's like, that's way too basic of a question in such an incredibly complex manner, because as a trainer, we're dealing with one, this is our identity as a person. This was our childhood dream. We truly love the whales. It is a truly reciprocal relationship, and we are living and working in a cult environment. And so there are repercussions for leaving a cult, especially if you plan on speaking out. And I know that very well, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not the only trainer that has faced that. Not the other trainers that spoke out in Blackfish, but trainers from the 80s. And some of the trainers that spoke out in Blackfish were from the 80s. But I wrote about it in my book. There are many examples of trainers that were involved in near fatal situations with killer whales, aggressions, and they were in ICU and nearly died for massive internal injuries. And they sued SeaWorld for negligence. And because they were, in some instances, they were made to get in the water, even they didn't want to get in the water. They saw something was off with the whales behaviorally. They didn't feel safe, and they were told, you get in, you do this show. And then, the whales aggressed on them, and they broke their necks and, lacerated their livers and spleens, all kinds of nasty stuff. And when these trainers tried to sue SeaWorld, and they didn't have a platform like I have when I spoke out against SeaWorld, SeaWorld just crushed them in court. Crushed them. The power of a multi-billion-dollar corporation going up against a trainer that was making, at that time, probably $12 an hour. They just crushed them. They forced them into bankruptcy, and they were gag ordered. Every single one of those trainers were gag ordered. So not even allowed to speak about what happened to them. But because I knew about it, and I knew these people personally, I wrote about it in my book because I'm not gag ordered. So it's like a way to finally get these stories out that people didn't even know about. It's like you don't know about these people.
They seem like such knobheads. I don't know if you have that term in America. Do you have that term in America?
We don't, but I have British friends, so I know what you're saying.
They just seem like, honestly, some of the worst people in the world. That's what they seem like, because like the thing with I had a question: is there a way to make orcas or animals like that in captivity somewhat humane or better? So that, I guess that's one question. But surely make the pool as deep as it needs to be for an orca not to have to drag its tail. That seems like laziness and negligence on their part, doesn't it? Penny pinching. Why did they make it like that?
That's a great point, and I don't think anyone has ever pushed forward with that to try to understand it. And I'm glad you are, because that was one of my major fights towards the end of my career. Because and it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's on the subject. The end of my career was at the Texas park, but I spent the majority of my career at the California park. But in Texas at the end, the whales were peeling away the paint and the front show pool on the walls and on the bottom, and they were ingesting it. Obviously, that's a health issue for the whales. The pools.
And are they doing that because they're bored?
Absolutely. That's the reason why they do it, because their environment is so sterile. There is nothing for them to do. And this is such an incredibly off the charts, highly intelligent animal. So when they and then while they're doing that, they're also self-mutilating, because they're against the concrete, and their rostrums are all bloody, and it's such an obsessive behavior, like people in solitary confinement. They can't stop. And so, I mean, we would have to many times we would, because it was such an obsession, and we couldn't behaviorally get the whales to stop, we would prevent them from going into the pool where they would show this self-mutilation type behavior for long periods of time, to try to get them out of the repetitive nature of it, and hope that with some time and distance, that then when we finally let them back into the front show pool, or whichever pool they were doing this in, that behavior would extinguish. But so I was to repaint the front show pool at Shamu Stadium in Texas was I these are again estimates. It's been a while since I've given these stats, but I think it was $1 million to paint and they, I was fighting this issue. So management was telling me that they didn't have the money to spend for this. Now, they were making hundreds of millions of dollars of profit, and the reason people 100% of the time when people come to SeaWorld, they see the Shamu show. 60% see the sea lion show, 80% see the dolphin show, 100% of guests, paying guests, come to see the Shamu show. So the killer whales is what's making the company the money. And then they, just for theatrical reasons and elements, they put in new lighting in our stadium. So we had existing lighting, but they wanted to upgrade the lighting to more advanced LED lighting. Okay, obviously that's for the public, right?
Yeah.
That's for the public. That doesn't benefit the killer whales in any way, shape, or form. They spent over, I think it was 1.2 million to install newer LED lighting for the front show pool, and then said, no, we don't have the money to spend $1 million on repainting the front show pool so our whales would stop peeling the paint off and ingesting the paint. And that's just one of many examples that I could give you where that happened. And just an overall picture, just people should understand this. The killer whale stadiums where those whales are right now, SeaWorld of Texas, SeaWorld of California, SeaWorld of Florida, those Shamu Stadium, those front show pools, everything, those are the same pools from the 1980s. Florida was the first one to get the new stadium in 84. California followed in 87, and then Texas was built in 88. So what's the math off the top of our head? That's over 30 years?
Yeah, 35 or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, nearly 35 years that they have never improved the environment for those whales. After 35 years of making hundreds of millions of dollars of profit each year, it's crazy. It's crazy. So at the end, and I was trying everything with management. I was like, why can't we just set aside that 10% of the profits, 2% of the profits will go directly to improving the whales' habitat so that they can, with each year that SeaWorld becomes more powerful, more lucrative, more profitable, that the whales get some of that benefit because they're the ones that are there earning it for you, and they wouldn't. And proof of that is that there were no changes since the 80s on those pools.
I just can't fathom how someone can be that cruel to an animal. And also, it's not even being cruel to the point where you're just keeping them in captivity, which is cruel in itself, extremely cruel, but the fact that you're like, nah, we'll leave it an absolute mess and we'll upgrade the lighting for the humans is just an absolute shambles. And when you were talking about the attention, the fact that they're just doing it because they're bored, if you leave a dog, which is an animal that is significantly less intelligent than what an orca is, or a killer whale, it will start tearing up the house. It will start tearing up your pillows and all that sort of stuff, and digging and all that sort of stuff. Can you imagine how intelligent are orcas, by the way? Is there some sort of apparently they have accents and things, like regional accents and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, and first your point, your equivalency about dogs ripping up and being destructive, your point on with that. Absolutely. And I don't get why, that there are still some people out there that cannot understand, that the few people that are still actually visiting these parks, why can't you understand that these whales should not be there? That this is grossly inhumane. It is barbaric, and it is a truly it truly is a stain upon humanity that as humans we have captured these animals from the wild, stolen them from their families, by force put them into these sterile miniaturized for them, confinement in these blue painted concrete pools, and then made them perform so that they could become incredibly wealthy and powerful. And these whales have just suffered. It suffered. Not one whale has ever died from old age at
I was going to
SeaWorld.
say, that was one of my questions. Like, how often do killer whales in captivity die from issues that are related to their captivity?
Yeah, so all the time. So just in my career, every single killer whale that I worked with, and I worked with over 20 killer whales in my career between SeaWorld of Texas, SeaWorld of California, and Marineland in France. And swam with 17 of those 20. And the only ones I didn't swim with is because they were non-waterwork whales. And nobody swam with them. So every single whale has been medicated on medication at many times throughout their life. And some whales that I worked with, many, were on medication every single day of their life in captivity until the day they died.
Why is that?
Because they were always sick. They were always sick. Going back to the stress, when we can test in the blood and you can actually see the elevated stress levels in the blood, that led to ulcers. And we would then medicate them for stress ulcers. And the medication, you can actually look it up. It specifically states that it's for stress ulcers. So, so there's no way around SeaWorld to debate that. It's like if you're putting your whales on medications for stress ulcers, are you going to sit there and tell us that they're not stressed out? You can't do it. That's why SeaWorld always evades these types of head-on confrontations, and they just go into their talking points, to just try to wiggle their way out of it. And every single interview where I've done, SeaWorld has been asked to go on with me, and they have always declined, and they just put out their bullshit PR statement. They sit there and they have their PR team, their crisis management team, and they go over that and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, and then that becomes their statement that goes out to the press to combat whatever interview that I've done. They always call me a liar, and then they go straight to we are a world-class zoological organization. We are accredited and blah, blah, blah. What people don't understand about their accreditation is SeaWorld controls it. SeaWorld is the one running the organization that gives the accreditation. So they're
giving themselves first place.
Exactly. And then they use that as a talking point to look, we're accredited. It's like, it's madness. But, most people, and I understand, they don't know this. They don't understand it. They just see the SeaWorld commercials or the SeaWorld ads. They see SeaWorld's PR statement. And sadly, people don't dig deeper.
It's so sad. You said that the very few people that go to these places still. What are the capacities like that? Are loads of people going, or is it died down a lot, or?
Yeah, well, since Blackfish and my book and all the media and the court cases, we've decimated them.
Yeah, go on, the boy.
Decimated them. I mean, it is, on top of the legislation that we passed, that I was an expert witness for that legislation in California, that I testified twice before the California State Assembly, first time in 2014, and then again in 2016, and it was signed into law by the California governor in 2016. And that ended SeaWorld's breeding program.
Yes. Tell me about that. I'm really interested in that.
I just want to, because this goes back to a question you asked before, and I didn't fully answer it, and I think you would like this detail. So going to their life expectancies. So, in the wild, in their natural, this is a lot of my still SeaWorld programming, because we always had to say the wild. We could never say in their natural environment, or and we always had to say, we could never say captivity. We always had to say in a zoological setting. These were forbidden phrases and terms. And it's amazing that even to this day, how when I just speak, my mind is so programmed to I carry the SeaWorld, really it's baggage. But so, females can live 80 years in the wild. Males typically it's 50 to 60 years, and we've had there's evidence of some females living as long as 100 years old. So now you contrast that with SeaWorld, and now we do have a few outliers that have lived into their 30s. And Corky right now is in her 40s. She's the only one that's in her 40s. Now that's an outlier, because we've had, and again, I'd have to go back to my own book to see exactly how many whales SeaWorld has owned. I think it's 69. So every single killer whale that has died, it was not one was because of old age or that lived their life. It was all from disease and infection. If you had, if you put that onto the public, and every single person in the human race was dying from disease, that would be a plague. That would be a plague. So how is it?
Or a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. A pandemic. That's, unfortunately very timely. But, it's, so every single one, and they're not dying at, like, oh, well, they lived, almost a full life. I did, now it's obviously a few years old, but I did an op-ed, and I've done so many of these. You could find it, but it's an op-ed where I evaluated just the last 10 years. So at the point that I wrote the op-ed, so obviously this is, since I've been speaking out against SeaWorld and since I left. So this was probably 3 years ago that this op-ed happened. And I analyzed just the 10 most recent years of SeaWorld, of the whales and the ones that have died, and how old they were. Because SeaWorld, in battling with me and the media, were saying, one of their talking points was, we are the most scientifically advanced organization in the world. Every year we get more advanced. So then I use that against them to go, okay, if every year you're more advanced, that means you're claiming right now this is your most advanced you have ever been. So then I just did the last 10 years, and of all the whales that died, and I think there were somewhere between 8 to 10 whales that had died within that 10-year window. And the average life expectancy of those whales that had died was like 12.5 years.
Jesus.
So, so SeaWorld will always, and SeaWorld supporters or trainers that are still at SeaWorld, even though they're not allowed to speak to the media, they'll say, they'll always like to use Corky as an example. Oh, Corky's in her 40s, we have the world class. It's like, well, tell me about all the whales that died before age 10. Tell me about all the whales that died before age 15. I mean, really, once you get like to 17, 18 years old, there are very few whales that have lived past 18, 19 years old. Almost the vast majority of them, and again, from my career that's really stretched over a 19-year period, because at one point I left for 5 years, but my actual time was 14 years of experience, but spread out over 19 years. The overwhelming vast majority of these whales are dead by age 19.
And as opposed to, what, 70, did you say?
Females 80 to 100 and males 50 to 60.
Wow, that is catastrophic, isn't it? That is absolutely. And they fight as well, don't they? In there, like I think I
Yeah.
saw it. And by the way, I was a big fan of Blackfish. I saw it for the first time in 2016, and I was in California with my two mates. We were 16 years old and happy to be out there. And we stuck it on, and we were just absolutely blown away by it. I forgot what I was going to say now, but oh yeah, no, they fight. So you put because as I said, they have accents, I think, don't they? And they have like if you're a whale from location X and I'm a whale from location Y, you might as well be from Spain and I'll be from, wherever, Australia. We can't speak the same language. We're not the same. We don't mix, do you know what I mean? And so,
Absolutely.
I mean, you definitely know what I mean. So they fight, don't they? They don't get on if you mix them.
That's right. I mean, the whales that do get along are usually, mother-daughter,
Yeah.
stuff that is, where there's true nuclear family. But, but that's very rare because also one of the horrible things that SeaWorld does is that they separate the mothers from their calves.
I think that's one of the most awful. That's the bit in Blackfish where the mum, I can't remember what her name was. You probably know.
Probably Kasaka and Takara, that separation.
I think that was it, yeah. And I think the mum was just Takara, or one of them was just standing there, floating there, looking at the wall and just like screaming, sort of thing, and just wailing. And that's the bit that I was like, that was the breaking point for me. I was like, this is so inhumane, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, in Blackfish, I spoke about Kasaka and Takara's separation. Kasaka is the mother, Takara is the calf. Now, sadly, Kasaka is dead, and Takara is, she's still alive, but she's clearly an adult. But there's still, despite that, it's always a mother calf reference. And I have to say that because SeaWorld tried to use that as one of their talking points one time, like, they're no longer a calf when we separated them because she was 4 years old. It's like, are you kidding me? Like 4 years old is still the calf of her mother, and she would still be her calf if she were 20 years old. Like, you can't just start arbitrarily changing scientific terms and descriptions and facts. Absolutely. The facts. So in Blackfish, Carol Ray was speaking about the separation between Katina, the mother, and Kalina, the calf. I worked with Kalina at SeaWorld of Texas. She died also very young. And then I spoke in the film about the separation, like I just said, between Kasaka, the mother, and Takara, the calf. But it's such a traumatic event for these whales, and for SeaWorld to dismiss it and to try to argue it away like this is somehow normal, and there's no problem in separating mothers from their calves. But a huge victory again with the legislation. So the legislation that I was an expert witness for, that was part of the law, is that they could no longer separate mothers from their calves. So these are the reasons why I agreed to both sponsor the legislation, but also testify before the California State Assembly as an expert, because it shut down SeaWorld's breeding program and stopped them from separating the mothers from their calves. And it also prevented them from shipping whales to China, to the Middle East, to Spain, or even from one park to another park. It stopped that too. So, and it also stopped the shipping collected semen that we do through artificial insemination, shipping that across state lines to other parks to artificially inseminate female whales. So we ended, through that legislation, we ended the artificial insemination program also, which is huge. And just to think back on just like the length of my career, I was one of the trainers who trained on Kasaka, the very first ever artificial insemination. 2000. You're right. Thank you. You did your homework.
Of course I do. Of course I do.
Yeah, in 2000, and at that time, believing like the SeaWorld hype and propaganda behind it, that how incredible this was for everyone, including the whales, and we were all happy and excited. And then you translate that to the end of my career, and I am doing everything I can to try to stop artificial inseminations on Takara or any other whale, and I couldn't stop it. And then because I was Takara's team leader and had the strongest relationship with her, I'm having to be in control of Takara while she's being artificially inseminated, and just telling her over and over again, I'm sorry. I tried to stop this. I'm sorry. It really is
heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking because these whales are so highly intelligent. And I know that you asked that earlier, so we need to go on that. But these whales know, they understand, they get it. I mean, this is kind of just an offshoot story. It's kind of funny, not funny. I don't know how actually you think of it. This is the life of a killer watcher. Now I'm going to give you a story that happened to me in my career, just to show you how smart they are. So I was at SeaWorld of California, and Petey, who people have seen, I think it was also, it was included in Blackfish. He's the bald-headed trainer that was dragged down to the bottom repeatedly by a whale. So that was Kasaka. And Kasaka was very dangerous. She's actually the most dangerous waterwork whale in the corporation. I swam with her for years. I had a relationship with her, worked her in shows, swam with her in shows, did everything. But so in California, Petey had her for a show, and she was really poor behaviorally, and it had pissed off Petey. And I think one of the things too, that he was upset about is that she was aggressing other whales in the show. And obviously we don't want that to happen, right? We don't want the whales to fight, but that is a
part of it.
Yeah, it's a product of captivity. It's a product of confinement. When you put anything in confinement, they're going to fight because your stress levels are through the roof. You have minimal tolerance. So
we all had arguments with our family over lockdown, right? When we were stuck together for too long, we have arguments, absolutely. And it's only sort of emphasized more if you're in a tiny little pod compared to what you're supposed to be, and you're with people that you don't know.
Yeah, it's just escalated off the charts. So as trainers, we're not supposed to react to behavior that we don't want and draw all the attention and positivity to behavior that we do want, and we want to increase in frequency and intensity. So Petey was pissed off at Kasaka that I think she had shut down the show. She had aggressed him on the whales and chased them, and the show had been canceled, or part of the show had been, in his eyes, ruined because of Kasaka. So as a punishment to Kasaka, which we're not supposed to do, we're not supposed to punish the whales, he told me, take Kasaka and go put her in the back medical pool, which is the smallest pool, which is only 8 feet deep. We're not supposed to, by law, even house the whales in the medical pool. It's supposed to be for medical purposes or for very short durations, like maybe moving the whale through the medical pool from one back pool to the other, or if you're doing some type of procedure or something and you need to use the medical pool for various reasons, but then you take the whales out of there. You're not supposed to just leave them in there. It's actually against the law. In all parks, so not just in this situation with Petey, but in all parks, and really sadly, especially in Texas and Florida, this was done every single day on these whales, left in the medical pool, just burning, frying in the sun with no shade structure in an 8-foot deep medical pool with their tail flukes getting all cut up, blood in the water, and they actually have sunburns on their back. As they just
and the mosquitoes as well, what you were saying.
Yeah, and we've had whales die from encephalitis that come from the mosquitoes, which they've never died from that in the wild, because whales that are swimming freely in the wild and diving and swimming, they're not subjected to mosquitoes. They've never had to even be exposed to mosquitoes. But so now, because of captivity, and especially we didn't have a mosquito problem in California, but in Texas and Florida, it's a huge problem. And we've had 3 whales die from mosquito bites. So how sad is that this unbelievably impressive, majestic apex predator is killed by a mosquito because it is a foreign invader to their immune system.
Yep.
So back to the PD story, because this actually is one of a million examples I can give you of the intelligence. So he's upset with Kasaka. She clearly knows he's upset. If she think like, they read, it's not just what we say verbally, they're reading everything about us, even just our energy level. They pick up on all of that, just like we can pick up on it from them, but they can do it much better with us. Yeah. So Petey's pissed off at her. She already knows it. And he passes her off to me and says, as a punishment to her, because I remember his words, he said, if she can't get along with these whales, then she's going to go sit her ass by herself in the medical pool until she can behave properly. So, and I was like, because Petey, I think Petey was either 1 level or 2 levels above me. I don't remember. Yeah, at one point he was just 1 level above me, but he was my senior, so it's just the best way to say it. He was senior to me, so if Petey told me to do something, I had to obey him and not question it. If I did it, after I was done with the whales, then we could have a discussion about it. But at the end of the day, the more senior trainers, they give the directive. And obviously, then when I was in a senior position, I did the same thing to trainers that were, below me. That's just the hierarchy of it. So he passed Kasaka to me and said, "Go to put her in the med pool." And I was like, "Petey, I don't want to put her in the medical pool because I don't want her mad at me that I'm the bad guy that now is going to go put her in the medical pool." So, the whole time that middle divide between the back pools in California is really long, and there's an elevated, the wall is elevated above the surface, and we call that Bird Alley because all the seagulls used to land on it. So I was running down Bird Alley, which trainers can't even do anymore since Don's death, and I had Kasaka, I took control of her, so she's following me. So anywhere I go, she's going to swim and follow me. And the whole time I'm running her down Bird Alley to get to the medical pool, I'm telling her, I'm like, "Kasaka, I'm sorry. I don't want to put you in the medical pool. Like, I don't want to do this to you. Like, he's making me do this." And she's totally calm. She's like, didn't have a care in the world. I had to get my own gate, which that's hard. So I'm in control of a whale, the most dangerous whale in the corporation, waterwork whale in the corporation, who's just been poor behaviorally. I'm in control of her. I'm having to unchain my gate, put the pressure for the gate, open it, close it back, do it all myself while I'm working her. And so she had, and the reason why I bring that up is that she had so many opportunities. She could have just split right back out. Like, I'm not going in there. I'm either not going to go in there, or once I'm in there, when you try to close that gate, I'm just going to swim right back out, and if the gate's already closing, even though that's thousands of pounds of pressure, those whales just move it like you and I moving a toothpick. It means nothing. Yeah. It means nothing to them. They just move it like, you think that gate's going to stop me? So these large, enormous stainless steel gates that weigh, probably, more than a ton, with thousands of pounds of air pressure closing and opening. So, but she didn't. She was a total angel. She went in there. She chinned up on the deck, totally calm. The whole time I'm saying, "I'm sorry. I'm not the one that wants to do this to you. Please don't be mad at me." Because, I'm swimming with her and stuff. I don't want her pissed off at me. I don't want to have an aggression with her in the water. So, and I locked her up in the medical pool. And she was in the medical pool overnight. He left her in the medical pool overnight, separated from her calf, separated from the other whales in an 8-foot deep medical pool. And the next day, he went to go let her out of the medical pool. And I said, Petey, whoa, wait a second. Please let me at least let her out. Like you made me put her in there. Please let me at least let her out, be the one who let her out of the medical pool. And he goes, okay. So I let her out of the medical pool. She's completely calm. And that day, the very first time she worked with Petey, she aggressed on him.
Really?
So just put that all in context. Like, now, Kasaka, if she was, pissed off, and she could have aggressed upon me, but she didn't.
No, yes, she knew who it was.
Yes, she knows who the target is. She knows that it's like, okay, I'm not holding this against you, that you're the one that's locking me up in the medical pool. I know who did this to me, and he's going to pay. That's how smart they are. That's how smart they are. And I could give a million examples like that, of that just level of awareness, intelligence, thought process. Just it's off the charts. It's like an alien intelligence. I've said that before. It's crazy.
The thing is, right, I was going to say, do you think they come close to us, intelligence-wise? And I know they're not building stuff, but I think we're so ignorant as human beings to think that we need to see a production of artificial things in order to validate intelligence. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
that's, I think, because we're so dumb that we think that that's the only way that you can be intelligent. I think potentially even more intelligent than we are, or as intelligent as we are.
I really like you. You're point on. It's the truth. I can tell you that, because their brains just work differently than ours.
Yeah.
But there are absolutely things that those whales demonstrated behaviorally that we as humans could not do. Their brains, okay, and it's kind of a weak example, but it still proves my point. You know that game? Maybe you're too young for this, but when we're kids, because I'm an old man now. When we're kids, we played a game played memory, and you would turn over one card and turn it back over, and then turn over another card, and you try to remember where that card was.
Yeah, I've played that. Yeah.
Okay, so we as people, we struggle with that, right?
Yeah.
That's the game, as we try to figure. The whales, just to kind of give you kind of how their brains work, they would never make that mistake. They would know exactly where the card is every single time. So, just to give elaborate on that. So, when we train the whales on a behavior, we train it and put it on a visual signal, also a tactile signal, and also a underwater computer generated tone system. That's just it's a 5-syllable computer generated tone that happens within 1 second. 1 second of time, 5 syllables are emitted. And so the whales are so smart that just due to time restraints and things that we do, we couldn't obviously work tones on every single behavior. But like Takara, she knew 30 behaviors on tones.
Wow.
So say like bow. So this is the hand signal for bow. I could also touch her in a certain way and give her that signal tactile, and she would do it. I could also play, because we had a computer system, and we would touch screen, and we would in California, and we would touch it on the screen, and it would emit that tone, and she would know it was bow. But she knew 30 different tones. But you and I wouldn't be able to figure out
No.
in 1 second of time a 5-syllable and discriminate that between 29 other behaviors and have 100% success rate with it. They have 100% success rate. It's like they never forget. And to give one more example on that, because I know we need to speak about other things. Takara and I worked together and swam together where she was born in California. And then I left for France. She was separated from her mother, Kasaka, and shipped off to Florida. And then she was separated from her own calf during that process. And then she had another calf in Florida, and she was separated from that calf when she was sent to SeaWorld of Texas. when I came back to SeaWorld after I was in France, I came back to the Texas park. So now Takara and I are reunited. And there was a behavior called a zipper, where it basically they do a fast swim around the perimeter of the front show pool, and then they porpoise in 3 distinct places that they're trained. So they can't just zipper anywhere they want. They have to come up in the trained spots where they actually break the surface of the water and go back under. Well, Florida didn't have this behavior. None of their whales had this behavior. And she was in Florida for 5 years. So they never asked it of her. None of the other whales in Florida knew it. So now she's moved to Texas. Texas didn't know this behavior. None of the whales knew it. So I was the only trainer that even knew it, knew how to train it, knew what it was, knew what the signal was. So I said, you know what? I'm going to, and I was doing a session with her. I was like, I'm going to ask her for a zipper. So she hasn't seen it. She hasn't done it. She hasn't been asked for it in 5 years. And I just I gave it to her through a tactile signal. I put my 2 fingers on her, and I just, you just rub it down her like that. She went and did a perfect zipper 5 years later. 5 years later. And she did it to 100% criteria.
Yeah. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
They have that level of memory recall that's like a computer. So, and then the joke, because I know you'll like this, because this is exactly how you understand it. Other trainer friends of mine, we would joke and we would laugh about it, but it's also, we believe it to be true, that we would say all the time that if the whales had hands, we would
I was going to say that. I was going to say that.
Yes. We would be fucked because we would be the ones in the pool. Yes. We would be the ones in captivity and, doing stupid tricks while they got the billions of dollars. It's like, and we would laugh about it. And I know some people are like, why would you laugh about that? Because, we had to have some levity in dealing with our everyday environment, because it was not only at Killer Whale, it was so strict and it was very militant. And, everything you did was watched, and everything you did had to be the right thing, or you could be killed. So everything was very, very serious. And then also, we know the seriousness of the situation for the whales. So, often we use situations like that to have some levity as a release, because it was just so heavy, such an oppressive environment.
We've only got so many things and been able to build and create guns and all that stuff because we're so poor. In regards to evolution, like we're so shit, right, that we can't protect ourselves. We have to create these other things. Killer whales don't have to create it because they got big old chompers that they can eat you with. They don't need to build a phone because they can speak to each other from miles. Why would they need a phone? Do you know what I mean? Right. So we only have phones and guns and stuff like that because we're so bad that we can't do it just naturally, right? And so that's the level that these guys are on.
Yeah, and we build stupid shit that serves no purpose most of the time. Why do you need that for again? There are obvious advantages for that we have hands.
Of course,
but if they had hands, as we would joke around, we would be the ones in the pool.
Really, and also how dumb are we that we're doing so many things that are ruining the world that we live in. Like if you actually deep that thought, that the fact that we're creating all these things with fossil fuels and cars and all these other transportation, that just ruining the world, and we think that we're intelligent doing that. Do me a favor. There's no chance. There's no chance. So
the arrogance of the human race,
ignorance.
Exactly. The arrogance with the ignorance of the human race is so appalling. It's so abhorrent. And it's because not just the stupidity and the arrogance, but because that has a direct translation to the cruelty of other species. Like, like, okay, look, if we want to fuck shit up and we want to be cruel, just keep it to our own species. But we don't do that. We don't do that. We go out there and we're like, oh, we're going to conquer everything. Everything is going to be the slave to us because, and I speak often with people and they're like, oh, but we're the supreme species. Like nothing is smarter than us. It's like, oh my God, that's such that's so arrogant. Like, do you hear yourself?
That's
Like,
such an unintelligent thing to say.
exactly. It's like, and then they'll talk about like, killing animals, hunting. It's like, oh, but wait, you're the one that is hiding. You're putting on camouflage and you're hiding up in something, and then you had to build a weapon and use the weapon because you couldn't go toe to toe with this bear or this lion or this elephant. So you have to be the coward and hide, and then use a weapon, and then you think you're some big bad man or woman.
Yeah.
So
you've hit the nail on absolutely on the head, and it's your point, not mine. I'm uneducated with this sort of stuff, but I listen to podcasts and I like this topic, so I do try and go out there and think about stuff like this, and it's absolutely spot on. It's just it shows how unintelligent we are that we think that we're that intelligent. I want to touch on you talked about the transportation process, shipping from America to China or something like that, and actually in research for this, you spoke about a whale drowning in the process of sort of trying to lift it up and take it away. Could you tell us a little bit about that specific instance of the whale drowning? I mean, it sounds almost unbelievable, but the whale drowning, and also what that transportation process is like and how inhumane that in itself is.
Well, you may have to refresh my memory because the whale that drowned that I'm thinking about was Haylen, and she was 2.5 years old, and her mother had been taken away from her. Her mother was Kayla, and in the necropsy it showed that there was an issue with her brain. Again, these are all direct results of captivity.
This one was you were lifting her out, or him out of the water, and he would hold his breath, or her breath, hold their breath.
This is Haylen.
And then when they would be lowered down again, that they would be able to breathe again, they didn't have the motor skills anymore, so that they would drown. I couldn't believe it when I heard it.
Yeah, so this is really sad. So, and again, this is because of captivity. This would not have happened if this whale had been born in the wild and had still been with her mother. So she was taken from her mother, by the way, on day one. Her mother was taken away from her day one, and when she died, she was 2.5. But during those 2.5 years, she was raped by her uncle. She was bred by her uncle. So an adult whale penetrating her, and she's a baby. She's a calf. And the importance to say this is that this would never happen in the wild, and this would have never happened even in captivity if the mother would have still been there. The mother would have never allowed this to happen because it is a matriarchal society. Females are dominant, and there's no way that male would have even tried that. But because we have totally fucked up the way that they should be naturally, all these other byproducts of that happen, like being the incest of being bred by her uncle when she's a baby. It's like in the wild, they don't start even exhibiting sexual behavior until age 13.
She literally was raped then, wasn't she? She literally was raped.
Absolutely. So, and as trainers, we didn't want it to happen. We didn't like that as trainers, and we would try when we saw that, we would try to then separate Keat from her, but the damage is done. I mean, often we would see blood in the water after that. I mean, obviously because there's ripping of the skin in the vaginal area. It's anyway. So, but how Haylen died. So, a week before she died, when she would slide out, we would ask her to slide out. She would list a little bit off to, I forget which side it was now, but she would list a little bit to side. It was very subtle, and I was like, that's odd. And so we were just like, oh, well, let's keep an eye on it. She could be uncomfortable, like she could have it, and we checked her out, like rolled her over everything to see if she had an abrasion or a cut on her ventral side that could cause her, discomfort sliding out onto the slide, and everything was fine. So it's like so weird. And so then we thought that maybe it was just she just behaviorally, her criteria, she was doing this, and we needed to correct it behaviorally, like you know, correct the criteria of it for her, shape it for her again, show her what is the correct way. And she wouldn't stop listing, and it started getting progressively worse and worse. And then out of the blue, I say out of the blue because we obviously saw this listing in the slide out, but out of the blue, it went from 0 to 100, where she was in a pool by herself in the back pool, and we were about 45 minutes away from a show. So we're already starting to think about the show and getting ready to go in for getting the show plan, which we do 30 minutes before the show. And she started swimming at a faster rate of speed. Of course, they all have to go in a circle because they don't have much space. And she's exhaling really hard. And when whales are doing that, they're upset. And, so we could see that she was under duress for some reason. And then we're trying to, like figure it out. Like, okay, because often when that happens, they're just pissed off about something, right? Like something has upset them. But here in this situation, sadly, it was because she was in physical duress, and she was struggling. And so as it started getting more severe, as she was swimming around and exhaling out even more, she started doing these really weird, like, dive down and rolling over, and then you could see the panic on her. She really did start to panic, and we could see it. And that's when me and two other trainers because she was hitting herself up against the wall too as she was doing this. We're like, holy shit, we gotta try to get her into the medical pool. I think either me or Julie said, like, let's get her into the medical pool. And because they dropped we had people drop the nets at first, thinking that the net would, because the whales and dolphins instinctively notice stay away from a net. But actually she started swimming into the net. And so they were like, oh shit, pull the net out, because if she swims in the net and rolls, it's over. So we pulled the net out, and again, it was either me or Julie that were like, let's get her into the medical pool so we could reduce her space, and then we could also lift her up by the floor, because we were trying to get her to stop from slamming herself into the side of the pool. And two, at this point, we're like, what the hell is going on? And so we get her into the medical pool, and she was still doing it. And she was just violently, because she was young, she was so young, she could actually turn around in the med pool. And she was slamming herself against the wall, and she was just getting more, like, her vocals were on the extreme level of showing duress and just stress and panic. And our heart was breaking, and we were desperate to try to get it under control. So then, again, me and Julie were calling the shots there and saying, like, okay, let's lift the floor. Like we have to, like, take the water away from her to get her to stop from throwing herself into the wall. And but as soon as we beached her, as soon as the floor raised and lifted her up, and there was no more water, she held her breath, which the whales don't do. So, and she was just totally panicking. And then was like, okay, she wasn't breathing. And we know how long, like, it takes for an adult to especially under those circumstances, when they need an next breath, and obviously a younger calf breathes more frequently. So we're like, she's not breathing, like, lower it. And as soon as we would lower it, and give her any amount of water, she would start thrashing and throwing herself against the wall. So then we were trying to be like, okay, raise her out, and it only be minimal. So there's just enough water to take away her access to move, but enough water where she would feel comfortable to breathe. We were desperately trying everything. And then we gave, when you raise the water, you have to put in these, they're like makeshift watertights. They go on this thing because the way the floor lifts, the whales can, if you're small like that, an adult couldn't do it, but a whale could potentially go over it and get underneath the floor, lifted floor of the bottom. So we had these barriers up, and she took her last breath and she just nosedived right down and into this barrier, and she wasn't coming up. And then when a whale dies like that, then very similar to when some people die and they urine or feces is so there was urine in the water. And then also there's like a really oily from that's expelled from her internally when they die. Mm-hmm. So it comes out from their esophagus. It's emitted, through other parts of their body, orifices in their body, and it's the death of the whale. This has come out. So when she was down there, and I was right over the top of her. I was closest to her, and I just looked. It was Julie, and there were two more female trainers that were lower ranked, and I just looked at Julie, and I said, "I'm sorry," because she was gone. She's gone, and all the girls immediately started crying. And Julie, because she was a supervisor, she had tears running down her face, but she was composed. Where the other two female trainers, they were hysterical. And so I told Julie, because I had just come back to SeaWorld, California, and they had worked with Haylen for the entire 2.5 years since she was born. And so I told Julie, I was like, I'll swim down and get her, because I knew that would be brutal.
And what was your connection to this this killer whale?
I mean, I had just come back to SeaWorld, so obviously I knew Haylen and I had worked her, but she died in June. I had just come back to SeaWorld in March. Okay. So obviously I loved her and I had worked with her, but Julie and those guys had worked with her for 2.5 years. So, and that helped also for me I would have never been hysterical, but like how Julie was, where she was crying down her face. I mean, I was heartbroken, but I was able to separate myself in that situation emotionally. And then I volunteered. I said, listen, I'll swim down. I'll get her. I'll bring her to the surface, because then we have to crane them out. And
is that not really heavy?
Yeah. Even as a 2.5-year-old, she weighed thousands of pounds. So I swam down to get her. And when I swam down, it was so sad. Her eyes were open, and I was just looking at her eyes, and her mouth was open just slightly. And she was so beautiful. And it was just like heartbreaking, just like so sad that this whale, her 2.5, she was born in captivity. First day of life, her mother is taken away from her. The 2.5 years have been brutal for her, and then she dies like this. She dies panicking, because what happened was she did lose her motor skills because of what was happening in her brain. Like part of her brain was like melted, and she lost her coordination and her motor skills, and she couldn't keep herself upright to be able to breathe. And then once that happened to her, it just sent her into a sheer panic, because these are mammals and they have to breathe air. And that's what broke my heart the most about it, is that how sad for an animal like this to panic knowing that they're drowning. And so I swam down and I looked her in the eye, and I just grabbed her body and was underneath her and pushed off from the bottom and pushed her to the surface. And once she's at the surface like that, she'll stay floating at the surface. Right. And then I helped them crane her out. And then she was craned out, and then she, a necropsy was performed on her.
So sad. Just the idea that a whale who for thousands of years has evolved to the point where they're almost the perfect species, and water is where they, exist so naturally, and it can just drown. That's such a sad concept, isn't it?
really is. And you know that she had to be thinking the same thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that she's this apex predator, and she knows she's drowning, and the terror and the panic in her, and she has no mother, and she's still a baby, and
Yeah.
she's having to now be freaked out and panicked, and knowing that this has happened to her, and she's alone.
And this is all because of captivity.
Absolutely, 100%. I would actually have to look it back up, but I believe she's one of the three whales that died from mosquito transmitted encephalitis. So again, that would have never happened in the wild. That could only happen if they're in captivity.
What are the arguments that you get against what you're saying? Because I don't know how anyone can listen to what you've just said there and gone, no, but actually now I think about it, it's a really good idea. Like, what are the arguments, some of the arguments that you get? What are the arguments for keeping them captive?
That they are ambassadors for their species, which is a SeaWorld line. That's a SeaWorld talking point. And that's a line that we were directed to tell the public all the time. Like that, these whales are in captivity, that they are ambassadors for their species. Like, to view them in a way like they're doing this ultimate good because of what these whales are doing, then other whales are somehow going to be saved magically. But this is the thing. No killer whale in the wild, not one single killer whale, not a pod of killer whales, none have benefited ever from anything that we've ever done or accomplished from killer whales being in captivity. So the whole line of that they are ambassadors for their species is a load of bullshit.
Yeah.
They're not going extinct.
I mean, it's for. I presume they say it's for educational purposes, but what? Ultimately, you need to benefit the animals. So what? Educating what? I'd rather the humans not be educated on them, and they can live free in the wild and do what they're doing because they were fine before we started piss farting about with them. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's you'd be surprised how many people. I mean, for people who don't know, I resigned, retired, whatever you want to say, in August of 2012. So so many times the public will say to me, like they don't understand that this all started because they were captured from the wild. And SeaWorld plays on this ignorance of the public, that they want to be so far removed from that people won't even think about the reality of it. Is that you do understand that for the whales that you're looking at now, that for decades there were brutal captures where they threw explosives in the water, and
I saw that. That was in Blackfish as well, wasn't it? Yeah.
And it was very common in each of those captures that adult killer whales were killed. So they were either killed intentionally or they would accidentally get caught up in the nets and drown. And then many of those deaths were concealed because they didn't want to report them. They were hiding all these details. So they would cut open the dead adult killer whale.
Rocks in them.
Load them up with rocks so that they would sink at least for a while, so they could get out of there and be like, oh, look, we didn't do anything bad. Everything's clean where we left it. But it was brutal because, they wanted a certain type. They wanted a younger, most of the whales that were captured were aged 2 to 4 every single time. So that was what they wanted. So all the other whales were expendable. Whether if they died, they died. And many of them did. So it's like, that's what you're paying for when you're going through these turnstiles still at SeaWorld or another marine park. My God, that shit show of a park, Miami Seaquarium, which is a total dump. I mean, you're really gonna pay the money to bring your child to look at that and keep that business going. You're giving that money
And think that that's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
unbelievable.
It's like well, I don't get it. And I've tried to okay, where are they coming from? What could they possibly be thinking? Because especially now with the information that's out there, from Blackfish, from my book, from interviews, from legislation, from lawsuits. I mean, my God, even the SEC fined SeaWorld for um, uh, insider trading and uh, securities fraud. And,
Hmm.
they were fined millions and millions of dollars. I mean, this is not a truthful organization, company, corporation. These are liars. They will lie. I mean, they blame Dawn for her own death. I mean, it's just like these are the worst types of scumbags that are profiting off of cruelty. And if you're paying and going there because what you think that's entertainment, you are complicit in this cruelty. And there's no excuse for it anymore because there's way too much information out there, including your interview now and what you're having to say. This is just another layer of the information that's out there for people. There's no excuse for it.
100%. And there is no excuse for it. And the only way that we can stop people from going, as you say, you absolutely decimated the place, but by keep talking about it, tell your mates about it, doing an interview about it, because the more we talk about it, the more people will learn about how awful it is. And yeah, as you said, there is no excuse. Finally, John, I want to quickly touch on the experiences you've had, because they get aggressive in captivity, which I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's ever been any incidents of killer whales being aggressive towards humans in the wild. Have there?
There's none documented, but I would say this: if you're in the wild with killer whales and you're agitating them, and
Yeah.
and really, you're stupid because one, you
Yeah.
should be leaving an animal in the wild
Yeah.
alone. But this is an apex predator, and they certainly are capable of killing someone in the wild, especially if they are upset about just the fact that you're invading where they want to be, where they're maybe feeding, or if they feel like you're relentlessly going after and there's a calf involved. Who knows? And the reason why I want to say that is because I hear people say like, well, I want to swim with them in the wild then. And it's like, that's exploitation all over again. If you're going to
Yeah. Yeah.
leave these whales alone, shit, just let them be with their own family and swim free. Don't go out there and schedule some trip where you're going to hunt some pod of killer whales down in the wild and then jump off the boat and start snorkeling, because that's the same thing all over again. Leave them alone. Leave them alone. Admire them from afar, but don't go into their environment and assault them, really, because I view that as an assault.
Harass them. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
absolute harassment.
But their aggressiveness gets worse in captivity, doesn't it? And
Absolutely.
obviously in Blackfish, you see that, via the guy that got dragged under, up and down, up and down. First of all, why was the killer whale? It almost seemed like he was toying with him, with the trainer, almost like he was like, yeah,
She was.
as you said, if you want to kill him, you can kill him, easy, 100% done, now, over.
Right.
But he wasn't. He was, let him swim all the way back up to the top, let him catch his breath for a little bit, and back down, you knob. Do you know what I mean? Like up and down, up and down. Why was he doing that? And second of all, what are your experiences with killer whales being aggressive to you? Because I know you've had one or two things happen to you.
Yeah, so they do that to make a point, because you're exactly right. They could decide, and they have done that, like with Tillicum, with Dawn, and also Keto with Alexis, when Keto killed Alexis just 60 days before Tillicum killed Dawn. They could kill you easily, like you said, like nothing. So they're making a conscious decision, and even in the worst aggressions, not to kill you. So they're making a good decision that they should be given credit for, but they're making a point, like that they are upset. And it depends on the situation of, sometimes just giving Kasaka and Takar. almost all of Kasaka's aggressions are related to her calf, her being separated from her calf. Or she's, like, for example, even just to show how serious this was, we had a rule that we would not close the gate. Like if we were swimming with Kasaka out front and we were holding her calf in the back, we would not even close that gate to the calf until the calf was at least 7 years old. So for the first 7 years, because of Kasaka's aggressive history involving her calf or not having access to her calf, we made sure that that gate was, so the calf was either out in the front show pool and being held, or being held in the back, but with the gate open so Kasaka knew she had access. And in that situation with Petey specifically, so Petey was doing a behavior called a Houdini, which is a rocket hop, but just we changed the direction of the rocket hop. So instead of doing it lengthwise in the pool, you do it like from stage towards the front slide out. So it's just a rocket hop, just positioned differently. But Kasaka had been having, she'd been failing because she had been twisting. And when they don't meet criteria, they don't get bridged, which means they don't get told that they're correct, and they don't get reinforced. So, and we had a rule in California, and where California was good is that behaviorally they were. I'm thankful that my behavioral abilities, I was brought up through the California park, because even the other parks admit California is the strongest behaviorally. So in California, we had a rule: if a whale was failing at 50% or less, it was taken out of shows. And the reason why this is important is because if a whale is failing and you keep asking them to do it, they become aggressive. Yeah. And it's not rocket science to understand why, because they get frustrated. They're frustrated, like, okay, I'm not getting this right, and you keep asking me to do this, and I keep failing. And if you keep pushing them, they'll aggress upon you. So she had been, when this happened, so she had, that behavior had been taken out of shows for a while. I don't remember how long it had been taken out. And in this particular show, Petey decided to do the Houdini on her, and it was the first time that he was trying to do the Houdini on her. And so, and where she aggressed on him is when he foot pushed down to the bottom, and as soon as he got off of her to get in position for the Houdini, that's when she started going for his feet. Like, just was like, I'm not doing the behavior, and now I'm going to aggress upon you. So now, so it was either one of two things. It was either because she was like, F you, I can't believe you're asking me for this, because this is a behavior that really upsets me because I fail at it and I don't get rewarded. And another trainer that was there, a supervisor that was there on stage at the time, said that Kasaka's calf was vocalizing in the back pool. Now Petey said he did not hear the calf underwater. He did not hear the calf vocalizing, but Wendy on stage said she heard the calf vocalizing in the back pool. So it could have been that the calf was upset and that immediately pissed off Kasaka, or it was that Kasaka was like, screw you, I can't believe you're asking me to do this behavior again. Like, I hate this behavior. Like, it's not a fun behavior for me because I never get rewarded. I always fail. So it was one of those situations.
And then you look, some people can, would look at the killer whale as the bad person, as the villain. It's been taunted, it's been frustrated for so long, and it's actually the fact that it doesn't happen more is credit to them, right? The fact that it's not killing everyone all the time, because if we got held in here and and I had a gun in my hand and someone held me in a pod, right, and I could shoot them, I would, because you're holding me hostage. But these guys, they don't, because they, I guess they're really kind-hearted animals to an extent as well, But yeah, what are your experiences with that as well?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. They exhibit and show a tolerance level and a humane level that we can't even do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like they could have and should have done so much more to say, to hell with this. I'm not putting up with this bullshit anymore. And they didn't. So, um, oh, there was another point I was going to tell you about that. But anyway, just on my experiences. So throughout my career, I had a total of 10 major waterwork aggressions,
Wow.
where the whales grabbed me in their mouth and they pulled me under the water.
Same as that PD guy. Same as that PT guy.
I've been pulled down to the bottom, but I've never had one that severe. So that
Right.
one that with Kasaka, I never had an aggression with Kasaka in the water, or dry. Um, but that aggression with PD with Kasaka, that is the most severe aggression in the water where a person lived. Um, she was pissed. She was pissed,
Yeah.
and I remember what I was going to say. So, and I loved Kasaka. I had a relationship with her. Clearly, I loved her. So, these major waterwork aggressions, and this is how this ended up getting out and got leaked out. Is actually released under a FOIA request, but we had an aggression reel at SeaWorld, and only us killer whale trainers were allowed to view it. So every aggression that we've ever had during shows, because all of our shows are recorded, uh, we would save those, and then they were used as a teaching experience for every. So dolphin trainers weren't allowed to watch it. Sea lion trainers weren't allowed to watch it. Only trainers at Killer Whale Stadium, and then it was under lock and key. Now, important to note about that aggression reel is it's like, oh, okay, well now we have the aggression reel. No, see, there were so many aggressions. That when all this happened with Dawn and then uh, um, OSHA demanded that SeaWorld turn over the aggression reel, and SeaWorld at first tried to deny, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't have anything like that. And then the Orange County Police Department confiscated it, and it was just a big mess even trying to get it, because SeaWorld was trying to hide it. But then SeaWorld ultimately, they what's the legal term when you screw with evidence? When you
Oh, I've got no idea.
yeah. When you so they removed.
Sabotage sort of thing.
Yeah, SeaWorld removed many of the aggressions that had been on there for years. And the reason why is because they knew that it would make the court case that they had ahead of them over Don being killed, and all the other stuff would make it would kill their narrative that they were trying to spin. So, like, for example, the ponytail. There were aggressions on that video that I had watched for years, and had also then taught younger trainers, lower level rate trainers for years using that video. Many trainers that it shows on video the whales grabbing the female trainer by their ponytail and yanking them under the water. But SeaWorld deleted all those aggressions, because their narrative for Dawn was that it was Dawn's fault because she let her ponytail float in front of Tillicum, and it was somehow a novel experience for him to see her hair, and he grabbed her hair and pulled her in. It's total bullshit. He grabbed her by the arm to pull her in. The ponytail is not a novel stimulus for the whales. The whales see girls with female trainers with ponytails all the time, and they're desensitized to ponytails from the time they are a baby, or from the time that we first get them. So the ponytails are on them, everything. So because the narrative for SeaWorld was to use that ponytail excuse and therefore put blame on Dawn, they had to then delete those aggressions on the aggression reel that already showed that we already knew and saw that the whales would sometimes grab when they decided, like, I don't want to do this show, or something's happened in the past, they would grab female trainers by the ponytail and yank their ass under the water. And one splash dragged a female trainer by her ponytail all the way down to the bottom of the front show pool, 40 feet by her ponytail, and then let her go on the bottom. So, but then my aggressions, so the 10 that I had total in my career, it's certainly not a fun experience, but very strangely, people think like, oh, you must be so panicked and thinking like, oh my God, when I've got to get to the surface, and I've got to breathe, and you don't think like that at all. You are, at least I am, and Petey was in his situation too. We are so calm in those situations. We just, because we've been so trained to just, in those emergency situations, to just remove our emotional um, element from the situation and look at it from a behavioral perspective. But what also happens, which is people would think like, oh my God, I would have never thought that. While I'm being grabbed in the mouth and being held under the water and dragged down, I'm thinking in my mind, like, why are you doing this to me? Like, my feelings are hurt. So
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, yeah.
yeah, I'm not mad at the whale. My feelings are hurt because I'm like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. And then my brain kicks in immediately to like, okay, I've got to get out of this. I need to figure out what's going on, and me and the whale, we need to work through this behaviorally so I can get them to calm down, so then I can get them to not only let me back to the surface, but then also let me exit the pool safely. And I'm a firm believer, and I would teach trainers that it's always, once you're at the surface and the whale's calm, instead of having the whale emergency recalled away, which most trainers do because they are in fear, I would always go to, I want the whale to take me out of the pool. So give me either a foot push or give me a peck push out of the pool, because that also shows the whale like, hey, we're a team, we're working with this, I trust you, and let's go. I want you to bring me out of the pool, as opposed to being emergency recalled to stage and then trying to swim out, because that's the scenario where Alexis was killed by Keto, is after he was emergency recalled away from him and he was told to swim out by the SeaWorld supervisor. Keto split from the SeaWorld supervisor and then went and killed Alexis Martinez.
Yeah. John, I could talk to you for hours, honestly. And at some point, if you're up for it, I feel like we might have to do a part 2, because I'm so fascinated by this topic. But unfortunately, I really need a wee. So we are gonna have to wrap it up. And I don't know how long the audience retention rates are. I don't know how patient they are, but
Exactly.
we will have to wrap it up. Hopefully, as I said, maybe in the future we'll do a part 2. I want to start asking people a question at the end, and ask everyone the question just to get a piece of piece of their personality. If you had to give one person one piece of advice, before you die, what would it be?
Just based off my life and my experience.
Yeah.
First, I have to preface it by saying I hate the expression "no regrets" or I don't have any regrets or something like that, because I have a lot of regrets in my life, and I think if people were truly honest, there are things in our lives that we regret and wish that we could have a do-over, whether it was a relationship or whatever. It's like, come on, you can't honestly believe that everything you've done in your life was like, oh yeah, 100%. I'd do it. I'd do the exact same thing again. But I would say it's very sad to me when I see people that truly don't know what they want to do, don't have a passion, and they wish they did, and they that to me is extremely sad. I'm like, I can't imagine just wandering around aimlessly wishing that you could find something that really connected to your heart and to your soul. But my advice that I would give is that if you have a dream and you have a passion, do whatever it takes to achieve it.
Yeah.
Go. I mean, just do everything that you can, and I believe that you will be successful. If you are 100% dedicated to pursuing your dream or your passion, I honestly believe that there's no way to stop somebody when they're in that frame of mind, because you will adjust and acclimate to whatever life throws at you to try to stop you from achieving that. And because at the end of the day, when my life is over, I just want even now, I'm so grateful because I know that I have done exactly what I wanted to do in my life. Everything that I've wanted, even the change, like after I left SeaWorld, and then, the documentary, the book, stuff like that, the testifying as an expert for legislation, which is what
Being
SeaWorld
on the
really
sit down, being on the sit down with me, you know
exactly.
what I mean?
Yeah, listen, I appreciate how informed and intelligent you are about
Yeah.
this subject matter. I can't tell you how
Thank you.
annoyed I am that, I'd have really big interviews from big outlets, and they don't even know anything. They're asking me the most basic, like kindergarten type questions, and I'm like, it's like, really? You're a big, whether it's like a CBS or ABC or whatever, and they're like, these are the questions you really want to ask me? Like, couldn't you think of something more important?
It's
So,
awful, mate. It's all because they're all looking for sound bites, and
yeah,
sometimes I don't know if I said it to you, but when I email guests and try and get them on, I say the nature of the long form nature of the content and the interview means that we can really get into a discussion and really explore the details of one's life or your life in regards to your passion for the killer whales and stuff like that, rather than going, right, we've got 5 minutes. What do you think of killer whales, John? And how cruel is it? Do you know what I mean? Right, you're off. See you in a bit. Now we've got the weather. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, I agree.
I love that about this. If I do say so myself.
Yeah, because it allows for a real, genuine, truthful conversation where
Exactly.
the good shit comes out. The stuff that people really want to hear. Like, oh, I've never heard that before. Well, of course you didn't, because I had 8 minutes on CNN, and and there were 6 questions that they wanted answered very succinctly. So, but yeah. So just whatever your dream and your passion is in your heart, don't let people stop you. Don't let people tell you you can't do it. Don't doubt yourself. Well, there are going to be bouts in time where you, throughout the process, that there are going to be times where you doubt yourself. You have to power through those moments and go, no, I know I can do this. Even if you fall down, get back up again. And I feel like I've lived a very full life, and I'm very grateful that I can feel that way.
Yeah. John, thank you so much for coming on the show, mate. It's been, to be fair, I think one of my favourite guests. I think one of the favourite guests that I've had on. We've done. I think this will be the 23rd, because we do them once every 2 weeks, and I think this genuinely is one of my favourite episodes. So I hope everyone at home has enjoyed it as well. John, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. And if you guys at home enjoy it, make sure to like, subscribe to the channel. We need all the help we can get at the moment, and we'll see you in the next episode. Ta-da.
Thank you so much.